I'm the air quality scientist at Southland there. I look after the air quality monitoring program. Also provide a little bit of technical support and advice to our policy and consents teams. So today a little bit of an overview of what we're going to run through. I'll quickly get into the state of air quality in Southland, kind of how it's looking, how it's been tracking over recent years. Then we'll look at the regulations that exist at the moment and touch on how they might change, and then conclude with the reasons for that change. So how bad is it really? What we're looking at here is the number of exceedances of the PM10 standard that the National Environmental Standards for Air Quality prescribe. So that's a 24-hour average of 50 micrograms per cubic metre. And we can see in 2015 there, last year, we had 11 in Invercargill and 2 in Gore. And back in 2014, Gore actually complied with that standard. So you're allowed to exceed the standard once per year. Anything above that is considered a breach of the standard. So Gore is actually increased slightly, and this year hasn't brought any better news, I'm afraid. Invercargill is currently on 9 already, and similar time last year it was sitting on about 4, and Gore is already at 3. So not great news in that regard. The little markers we have here, the triangle is an interim target for Invercargill to meet. So the government has set interim targets of no more than 3 by 1st of September 2016 for Invercargill, and of course Gore has to meet that no more than 1 by 1st of September 2016, and then Invercargill has until 2020 to meet that final no more than 1 requirement. So these values represent, I guess, the short-term exposure to PM10 pollution. Of course, there's also the chronic or long-term exposure that we're concerned about as well. So we look at the annual averages for that. It's not in the standards, but it is in the ambient air quality guidelines. And for both Invercargill and Gore, they're sitting very, very close to, if not above that. So for 2015, Invercargill was at 20.3 micrograms, so above that 20 limit there, and Gore was at 19.5. So they're both sitting fairly high for a long, that long-term exposure. So the key issue is not so much industry at this time. It is domestic heating for both of those areas. Invercargill, these values represent an average winter's night. So during the winter, we expect the PM10 contributions to be 92% from domestic heating, and in Invercargill 96% in Gore. So these are taken from an emission inventory completed back in 2011. There is a slightly more up-to-date version that the Ministry for the Environment have rolled out nationwide, and that's actually available through their website as well. You can have a look at. So industrial emissions in Invercargill on that average winter's night, we're looking at around about 6% of PM10 comes from industry, and in Gore it was only around 1%. So these do change seasonally, so obviously during the summer you do get a lot higher contributions from those. So diurnal variability, this is the daily pattern we see. These averages represent 24-hour average, over a 24-hour period. So it's hourly averages of PM10 in the red, wind speed in the green, and air temperature in the blue. They've been normalised to fit on the same graph there. We can see the lowest PM10 measured is just before dawn in the morning, increases slightly in the morning as we get people starting up, home fires and traffic emissions and boilers all sort of kickstart at that time. drops off in the afternoon as we get an increase in temperature, increased atmospheric instability, so more wind to move that around, and then during end of the day, we see that increase in PM10 again. So it starts to pick up as the temperature drops and as that wind speed dies away. So it's not really good news for the public. When you think about the sorts of activities that happen in that evening peak, so we're looking around about 6 p.m. Right through to around about 8 or 9 p.m. is normally when we see the evening peak. So you'll have people out walking the dog, going for a run. A lot of sports practices, particularly during winter, happen around that time, and so it's really not good news for them to be out exposed to that. And in fact, it's one of the most obvious places to observe that pollution during the winter is actually looking at the lights on the sports grounds. You can see it quite visible. So what does this look like? This is basically what we get in Invercargill. This was on the 7th of July this year, and just to give you a bit of an idea, the haze you see there resulted in the third highest concentration we've seen in Invercargill since we've been monitoring there. So the 24-hour average that occurred on this day was 139 micrograms, so almost 3 times the National Environmental Standards limit. And this is around about 6 o'clock at night, so just as we were talking about before. So obviously weather has a big role to play, as we saw before. When wind speeds increased, PM10 reduced as well. A lot of the problem we get down here is caused by the stable atmospheric conditions and temperature inversions, we've got a nice example there on the screen. We can see the smoke rising up to that warmer layer and not punching through that, so it basically gets trapped and sits close to the surface there. The stable atmospheric conditions we get are often associated with high pressure systems. So this winter is a good example of that. It's been quite a bit warmer, 1 to 2 degrees on the monthly averages than last year, and that's as a result of more high pressure systems. Brings out warmer weather, but it also brings that stable atmospheric conditions, and that's why we're so far ahead this year on our exceedances than we would expect to be. So looking at the regulatory framework there, it all starts with the Resource Management Act, and Section 15 of that Act is the starting point. Outlines that no person can discharge contaminants into air from an industrial or trade premise unless it's expressly allowed by resource consent, a national environmental standard, or a rule in a plan. So we do currently have in our regional plan a number of rules that obviously permit the activities that take place. Then flows into the national environmental standards, which we've touched on briefly. We'll have another look at in a second. And then down into the regional plan, and obviously the regional plan has a number of rules ranging from permitted right through to prohibited. Obviously you can't do those. The national environmental standards have direct input to that kind of consent level, so they do have a list of prohibited activities also, and some restrictions around consenting as well. So on to the national environmental standards for air quality. As we talked about before, the interim targets there. So for Gore, they had to meet they had to meet no more than 1 by 1st September 2016, and Invercargill has until 2020 to meet that. So what do the standards contain? Obviously, there's the targets. There's also offsets required for industry. So that's where you have a polluted airshed. If the discharge is going to increase ground level concentrations by more than 2.5 to 2.5 micrograms, then you have to either reduce your emissions or provide an offset for that. So There's a lot of guidance, so I won't go too much into that. It's available through Ministry of the Environment and their user's guide there, but for example, you could be paying to put in heat pump somewhere else to offset that extra PM10 that's been emitted. There's provision for exceptional events, so for example, if we get an exceedance as a result of a sandstorm somewhere, we can apply to Ministry to get that one scratched. Essentially, contains prohibition for open fires. That's been in place for a couple of years now. It's flowed through to our regional plan as well. And also contains standards for a number of activities that emit dioxins and toxics into the air, such as landfill fires, tyres, bitumen, coated wire, oil, and also high temperature waste incinerators, or even school incinerators are all prohibited under the National Environmental Standards. It also contains a design standard for wood burners that's been in place since 2005, and so that was any new wood burner that goes into a house on property less than 2 hectares in size has to meet that standard, which is 1.5 grams per kg, 1.5 grams of particulate per kg of fuel and a 65% efficiency. There are also 5 ambient air quality standards. Obviously we've touched on the PM10 one. There's also carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide and ozone there as well. So these standards are currently being reviewed. The Ministry for the Environment is looking at the possibility of incorporating a PM2.5 standard into that, and they're still, I guess, going through that process. I understand public consultation on that will be later this year, and then we'd expect those to be sort of finalised sort of around about this time next year. So we'll talk a little bit about airsheds. What is an airshed? Southland has 2 airsheds, the Invercargill airshed and the Gore airshed. It's similar in concept to the idea of a river catchment. So basically it's a management area that we have to control discharges to air basically. So our recent review to our regional plan has different provisions for properties within the airshed as opposed to those outside, because we're trying to protect the location where you have the most people exposed, and so that's within these urban areas. So proposed regional air plan, as mentioned, it was reviewed 2014 and covers all of Southland, including those airsheds and outside. Contains provisions, obviously, domestic heating, outdoor burning, agrochemicals and fertilisers, and fire training. So those 4 aspects were reviewed in 2014, and the remaining component of the air plan that hasn't yet been looked at is the industrial and trade emissions. So that section of the plan has remained untouched at this point, and that is due to be in a stage 2. In stage 2 of a review, it's still the proposed regional air plan. There is still a minor appeal on a definition that's outstanding, but all the rules in that do have legal effect at this time. So quickly on domestic heating, new rules have been imposed for small-scale solid fuel burning appliances, so that's basically wood burners and multi-fuel burners. They both have to meet the National Environmental Standards wood burner standard, so that's the 1.5 grams per kg and 65% efficiency. My understanding is that there aren't multi-fuel burners available at the moment to meet that, but there is the possibility for industry to come and face that challenge, I guess. Small scale solid fuel boilers, so anything less than 60 kilowatt essentially has to meet that same standard. There is a different option for testing that, so you can look at stack testing with 300 milligram per cubic metre emission limit on that, and that's to cover existing in place boilers as well. So the fuel specifications are also prohibitions on certain types of or certain fuels. So the obvious ones in there, we're talking rubber, so no gendals in these ones. Treated timber, any of those sorts of things are in there as well. And for domestic heating, we do have a moisture content for wood of less than 25%. Industrial combustion, these haven't been touched, so it's the existing permitted activity standard up to 5 megawatt, subject to criteria, which includes chimney heights. The current chimney height specification, we've been advised, is quite confusing, difficult to interpret. So that is one of the things that we looked at in the review. And then anything over 5 megawatts becomes a discretionary activity. So how do these compare? Looking at other regional councils, their permitted activity rules range between 100 kilowatt up to 5 megawatt. The 5 megawatt ones do tend to have other emission control requirements attached to them. Other notable features there are also different limits for pellet boilers, and many of them also have restrictions on sulphur content, which we don't currently have there. So they're looking sort of 1 to 2% for that sulphur content. So how might our rules change? We're not expecting anything too far removed from other regional councils. The chimney heights we're based on heat output and fuel type. We have had a little bit of work done a couple of years ago now by NIWA and Environet Limited, based chimney heights on some modelling that was completed, and so we have that there. We will update when we get to the review process, and that provides a much clearer, much easier to interpret indication of chimney height, associated with fuel type and boiler size. Fuel restrictions, we'd likely look at a sulphur content limit, as other regional councils have, and basically just a revamp of the criteria for permitted activities. So looking at revised opacity, proximity to buildings, including things such as the aircraft flight path proximity and a few of those other features too. Also new information requirements for discretionary activities. This plan is now 17 years old. Basically technology and information has advanced a lot in that time, so it's bringing it up to date. The timeline for that, so we're waiting until the National Environmental Standards for Air Quality have been reviewed, and so that's not until next year we'll find that out, and so the review of our own plan is likely to begin late next year, and then we'll be looking probably at consultation in 2018. So do keep an eye out for that, and make sure you become involved with that. So lastly, just very quickly, why these changes needed. Obviously it's we saw right at the start the number of exceedances we're having. These relate to health effects, and I won't explain all of it there, but you've got greater population effect at the bottom there with very low levels of decreased lung function and inflammation, right through to death, being the worst at the top there. Costs, there are also quite significant costs associated with that. I guess of relevance to New Zealand is the 2012 Happen study that estimated 2,300 premature deaths from air pollution per year, and also essentially 1.5 million restricted activity days. So that's a day when someone might go out and they can't undertake the activities they would normally. So generally those people will be affected by an existing condition, so asthma or COPD, something along those lines. So just finally on that, there is no safe level of PM10. We have the 50 microgram limit, but what we're ultimately trying to do is to reduce that as low as possible to ensure we have good health for the community. And yeah, further information is available on our website, breatheeasysouthland.co.nz, And as I said, do keep an eye out in 2018 for consultation opportunities.
The old domestic appliances, are they going to be grandfathered out, or are they just going to be banned?
Yes, they are. Yep. So yeah, all that information's on Breathe Easy Southland there, but we do have phase outs for those older burners. I did have the table in there and then took it out again, but essentially open fires from next year, 1st of January, and then I think 2019 is the next one after that, and that's I think pre-1997 burners, and then every couple of years after that there's a different phase out period. So we're looking through to, I think it's about 2035 before they're all kind of replaced to that new design standard.